All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for this evening, the Postpartum Trail Runner with Dr. Colleen Drahos in the house from Drahos PT. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you for having me, Kim. I appreciate it.
We are coming off of the Slop Apple where you braved the elements and you were out there with us. How was that experience for you?
Well, I don't know how much braving the elements I did. I think everybody else on the trails did a whole lot more than I did. I was just there with my chafing station and hanging out, giving people some lube. So it's a good time.
Yes. That was, critical on a day like we had last
It
Saturday.
was. It was. That was some wild weather, just, I don't know, some of the sloppiest conditions that I've ever seen.
It really was. Oh my gosh, what a wild time. But we are shifting gears now. We're stepping off the trail, though we're going to be talking about the trail a whole bunch. This evening, we're going to be talking about the Postpartum Trail Runner. We had a bunch of questions come in. So Dr. Drahos is first going to go through a cool PowerPoint, and then we'll hit the questions that you pre-submitted one by one in the order that they came in. So I think, Colleen, you have a little intro in your PowerPoint, so I won't even ask you to say that now. So I will queue up the PowerPoint
Perfect.
here. See if we.
Oh, let's find out. Let's see. Oh, that's looking good so far. That looks pretty good. All right. Good enough. Okay, so today we are going to talk about the postpartum trail runner. As we said, I'm Dr. Colleen Drahos. I'm a physical therapist, and we can go to the next slide. So, who am I exactly? I don't show up in a horse mask, but we got to have a little bit of fun. So, on a more serious note, let's go to the next slide. I am a licensed pelvic floor physical therapist. I see a ton of runners. I see adults of all genders. I have had my practice since 2021, but I've been a physical therapist since 2016. And we've had some nice, exciting news as of about February, beginning of February this year. I actually have moved into my own office space out in Randolph. And the cool thing about my office space in Randolph is I am right next to a local trail system. So I can literally take you guys out on some trail runs, see how the heck we're doing. That is a very helpful little part of my practice. Another new thing lately is that I actually just started the New Jersey chapter for women in ultra running. So you may have seen the tent for women in ultra running at some of the Sasquatch events. That is with Rachel. And we just started that chapter. Literally, our first run was this past weekend, and it was a great time. I'm going to be doing another one in Alamucci in April. So if you are interested in that, we'll have a little bit more information at the end of the slideshow. And you may have also seen me at some Sasquatch events with my chafing station. So I've been at usually about 3 a year. I will be at the Squatchy Surprise, and I will also be at the Wild Goose Trail Festival. And I come supplied with all sorts of wonderful lube options for all of your chafing needs. So if you see me, stop and say hi. Oh, the other thing, and I talk about this at the end too, but I also supply all the menstrual products for the Sasquatch races. So you will see all of those things near either the porta-johns or if there are actually toilets at any of the races, they will be there. So that's a little bit about me. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so yes, I am a runner. I love running. I started on the trails, and now I am actually getting a little bit back into it with the women in ultra running. I basically went from half marathons to 50Ks, and then worked my way up to timed format races. So I absolutely love the 24-hour race. That's my favorite. I have not done a Sasquatch race in a while since I've been away from trails, but my favorite ever was when they did the Squatchy Surprise at Watchung. Super fun format race, and I love that they have brought it back, even though it's at South Mountain, and that's not my favorite place to run. But maybe I have to warm back up to it again. I don't know. We'll see. Um, yeah, sorry, Kim. Um, they do love my 24-hour races. You'll see that picture there is me in South Carolina, and was literally running around a track for 24 hours. That track looks empty. I promise you there were some other runners that were there. I wasn't just running by myself. Um, My next run that I have coming up, it's not exactly a race, but I am actually I'm going to Hawaii in April, and I'm going to run up Haleakala. We're gonna see how it goes. Kinda looking into what the deal is with FKTs, but, it might just be like, survive it. So we'll see how that goes, but I love to run and I love to help runners, like I said, of all genders, but obviously this is all about the postpartum trail runner. Alright, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the one thing that I want you to think about is once postpartum, always postpartum. So this means that even if we had some issues that came up postpartum in that first year or so, if you didn't get them fully resolved, like you can still work on them. You can work on them at any time. There are things that I will see that are, people are 20 years postpartum and they had an issue that came up. They just didn't know that they could address it. And now finally, pelvic floor physical therapy is getting a lot more time kind of on the airwaves. People are talking about it a lot more. So you can get help for any issue that started during pregnancy, after pregnancy, no matter what your timeline is. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so these are some stats. They are a little wild. What you can see here is that 46% stop running during pregnancy. Um, this could be for any number of reasons. Pain, it just doesn't feel quite right. Maybe we're having some leakage, but 46%, almost half of women stop running during pregnancy. And then postpartum, there's actually a quarter of women who don't return to running. And we gotta figure out, like, why? What is the deal with that? Is it because they're having leakage and they are just like, "There's no way that I'm getting back to running?" Are they having pain? Are they having heaviness? Does stuff does not feel right? A quarter of women not returning to running is a big deal. Um, of the people who do return to running, only about 31% receive advice on how to return to running postpartum. Um, should we take it a little bit easy? Should we do a run walk? Do we need to do some strength training? A lot of women just don't know and they're not given guidance. So that can really get to that whole point of 25% not returning to running because they don't even know where to start. Um, the next couple stats talk about urinary incontinence, anal incontinence, and prolapse. So these are more of the symptoms of some sort of pelvic floor dysfunction. So almost 60% will have some kind of urinary leakage. Almost 40% will have some kind of anal incontinence. So that means some gas leakage when we don't want it to come out, or even some fecal leakage when we're not ready for that to come out either. And that is a big deal. No one wants to be running at the gym, running with a group of friends, running on the trail, and having some incontinence issues. And up to about 20% will have symptoms of prolapse. So that could be heaviness, that could be a feeling of like almost like a bulging of tissue when you go to wipe after you use the bathroom. It could be a sensation of pelvic pressure. These are a lot of things that can go on. And the cool part about it is that as a pelvic floor physical therapist, I am trained to help with all of these things. And as a food for thought, after orthopedic surgery, so if we have a meniscus tear, if we tear our ACL, um, if we have an ankle ligament reconstruction, we have rehab before we return to sport. Why don't we do this after pregnancy? Pregnancy is major, right? You are growing a baby for up to 9 months, and then you may have had a significant abdominal pelvic surgery, like a cesarean section, or you had a labor and delivery with a vaginal birth. That is a big struggle for your system to rehab from. So, as a pelvic floor physical therapist, this is where I come in and we can rehab your system, get you going back to strength training, running, all that kind of stuff, because you need a little bit of help, or sometimes a lot of help after having a baby, for sure. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk about some different shifts in the system that happen postpartum. This slide here talks about some main ones, but one of the things from a trail running perspective is we have to go down some crazy hills at times. So there's actually a change in how we actually brake to go down those hills. So if we're bombing down hills and our braking mechanics are off, that can throw some abnormal forces basically through the system. And if your feet are doing funky stuff, that's going to make your knee do funky stuff, your hip do funky stuff, your pelvic floor do funky stuff, and then potentially even traveling up into your core, your back. all the way up the system through your rib cage, your head, and your neck. Like, it's wild how much impact that this can have. Some of the trends that we will also see is decreased hamstring flexibility, some decreased hip strength, and then the muscles around your hips, so your abductors, the glute muscles and hip muscles that bring your legs to the outside, and then your adductors, your inner thigh muscles that bring your legs to the inside. Those muscles also get weaker postpartum. And then you'll also see here that one of the kind of interesting stats, which is like cool, but also like a little is 50% of runners return to running within, oh, that six is a little bit hard to see, but they return to running within 6 weeks postpartum. 6 weeks is a very, very short period of time. And that doesn't even allow for, the necessary like physiological healing to happen from a soft tissue standpoint. So if we can potentially get you maybe thinking about running at that 6-week mark, but maybe we don't get back to some true running until maybe around 12 weeks, that can actually put you in a better frame. Because when they return to running within 6 weeks, 35% report some sort of musculoskeletal pain. Okay. And that's a large amount. And then that might turn into those 25% of women who don't return to running fully postpartum. So it's just something to think about a bit. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so when we do go back to running, there's a lot that we need to address. And these are all things that I address as a pelvic floor physical therapist. We look at things like your strength of your pelvic floor, the endurance, the coordination. We talk about all things leakage. So, are we leaking a little bit when we start to run? Are we leaking when we're 3 miles in? Are we having some actual bowel leakage, or are we not able to control gas? That is all indicating that something funky is going on with our pelvic floor. And whether it's, not coordinated, whether it's not strong, whether it has decreased endurance, we got to figure that out. Again, are we having some symptoms of prolapse? Are we feeling a bulge kind of at the entryway of the vagina? Are we having pelvic heaviness? Are we having aching? Are we having pressure? All of those things are things to consider. Another thing that we think about too is our abdominal wall. So this is if you've had a cesarean delivery or if you haven't had a cesarean delivery, your abdominal wall stretches in all directions, and we have to get that back on board too. So it's this core strength, it's your pelvic strength, and then of course it's also your lower body strength because we are runners. We have to have a strong lower body. That's from like your feet up. Okay, we're gonna talk a lot about your feet actually. Um, Balance and proprioception. So obviously as trail runners, even as road runners, like we need to be able to acclimate to different terrain and not roll an ankle, not break an ankle, right? These things are very, very important. If we're jumping down from rocks, from bridges, we need to have a sturdy foundation to land on. And our balance, proprioception, and lower body strength is very important for this. Another thing, maybe it doesn't seem super obvious, but we are going to look at your running gait. So we do videos of overground running. That's why I love that I am right next to some trails here. But we are going to see from behind, from the front, from the side, what changes have happened with your running gait. Can we do some tweaks with your running gait to change those sensations of heaviness? Does it adjust and decrease some leakage? That's just some of the stuff that we look at. But as you can see, it's a pretty long list, but it does not end there. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this talks a bit about the minimum about your return to running screening. So you'll see this is a pretty long list. There were some really great return to running guidelines that were published in 2019. Um, and basically, you should be able to do these things with zero symptoms. So, symptoms meaning no leakage, no heaviness, no pain. You're just like, I can run through these things and I'm good. Okay. If you can walk for 30 minutes, if you're doing a single leg balance for more than 10 seconds, you need to be able to do 10 reps of single leg squats. I don't need you getting your butt to the ground, but I need you going 30, 45 degrees of knee bend to know that we can actually deal with some of the forces that we're managing during running. We should be able to jog in place for 60 seconds without something funky happening. No leakage, nothing like that. We should be able to do some forward bounding. We should be able to do some hopping in place on one leg. We should also be able to do, and this is basically kind of like running in place, but a single leg running man. So if you're standing on one leg, you should be able to move your arms back and forth and your lifted knee back and forth without having any leakage. We should be able to do some single leg calf raises, at least 20 reps on each side, some single leg bridges, and some single leg sit to stands. So I was talking to my husband last night, and he was reviewing a little bit of this for me, for, like, some typos, and he was like, "I don't know if I can do 10 single leg squats." And I was like, "Well, well, well, you don't have to get your butt to the ground, but you do need to be able to do this with control, without symptoms, and without any significant asymmetries." So that is something that we look at as the absolute minimum. And there are people who might be able to do all these things, and then they still have issues running. So it goes beyond this. This is a basic screen that you can look at, though. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk about your feet. So during pregnancy, a ton of changes happen to the foot, and this can impact everything. It impacts your running, it impacts your walking, it impacts your return to running postpartum, because you have these three arches in your feet, and basically they will start to become a little bit more lax. So your foot actually becomes a little bit longer and a little bit wider. So your weight distribution in your foot will also end up changing. And you might end up having more weight in the front of your foot, more weight in the heel of your foot, because basically your center of gravity and center of mass, I like to combine the two, change due to your increase in body weight. And you will put on, typically it's about 25 to 35 pounds during pregnancy, and that is significant, right? And there might be more weight that's put on, and that's all right. But same deal, it's going to put more pressure kind of through the foot and more potential for changes. The other interesting thing is this is not 100% of the time, but babies do tend to shift to the right when they're in the uterus. So there might be more changes that happen to the right side of your body. Um, and then when we think about things postpartum, we tend to get into a habit that we will always carry our baby on one side, whether that's your dominant side is carrying baby and then non-dominant side is doing the stuff, or non-dominant side carrying baby, dominant side doing the stuff. But there is going to be a pattern that you will fall into, and that's okay. But we have to realize that it is going to contribute to some of these patterns that we see, and some of the asymmetries that we will also see. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So the other things that we think about too, we're going to get a little bit into some anatomy, is again with the foot, you see these shifts actually in the bones. So your rear and midfoot can actually end up changing a little bit, and that leads to your heel bone, your calcaneus, to actually kind of shift a little bit to the outside. Technical term for that is eversion. Who cares? Um, but what that can do is it can lead to some overpronation with walking as well as with running. And this is where I get a little bit on like a soapbox, because sometimes you'll go to like running stores, you'll go and try on your shoes and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, you're pronating." Pronating is a totally normal part of your gait cycle, completely 100% normal to pronate. Overpronation is a different story. So we have to watch out for this overpronation that can happen. Really, we're losing a little bit too much control through that mid and rear foot, and that can basically go up the chain. So if you've ever had a time when you've been like, "Oh, I feel pretty good, but I have this pain on the inside of my knee, and it is just stopping me from running, it's stopping me from squatting or lunging." That is something that actually can be starting in your foot. And this can transfer up into the hip, up into the pelvic floor. It might actually make your pelvic floor work too hard or not work hard enough. So these are things that we look at, and we try to make sure that our feet are as optimized as possible. And there's a lot that we can do for that when it comes to either doing some strengthening, maybe we throw in some orthotics for a certain period of time as we were doing some strengthening. But these changes in our feet can impact what happens at our pelvic floor, and that is very important to keep in mind. Um, okay, next slide, please. Okay, so when we think about the foot again, as you look at this slide, you can see that women who have had babies are 2 times more likely to have lower limb problems later in life. And some of that is like, hey, if we have these changes at the foot, what happens up the chain, right? So you can have some knee problems. There's some research that says, talking about like knee replacements, talking about osteoporosis, because these changes actually start to happen during pregnancy and postpartum. And if we don't address them, they can kind of continue to wreak a little bit of havoc on the system. So stuff that I look at in PT is your calcaneus. So again, that's your heel bone. So what position is that in? Is it tucked a little bit to the outside? What about your navicular bone? So your navicular bone is a bone actually on the inside of the arch of your foot. And sometimes that will actually start to drop down quite a bit when that heel bone shifts to the outside. So we get a heel bone shift to the outside, and then we get like the arch of our foot kind of squishing down a bit. The other thing is we need to make sure that our big toe, our great toe, has enough extension. So sometimes that big toe starts to lose its ability to straighten and kind of bend backwards. And that is something that we absolutely need for running to make sure that our foot gets enough stiffness in it during push off. Um, Another interesting thing is shoe size. So we're going to talk about this a little bit in another slide. But because the width of our foot might change during pregnancy, the length of it can also change too, and we might actually need to increase our shoe size, not just in our running shoes, but even in some shoes that, maybe we have some fancy heels, maybe we have some nice boots that we wear, and they might not fit anymore, which can suck. But we need to do the best for our foot and not try to cram our feet into something that isn't fitting us. We can also look at patterns like where do we get calluses? Where do we get corns? Where do we get blisters? Because that can be telling for what kind of shoe do we need to maybe adjust into a bit. Um, the other thing, like I said, we can look at your running technique. We can look at this in the treadmill. We can look at this over ground, but both walking and running because we want to make sure that we are optimizing what our running gait is. And the last thing that we can look at, and I mean, there's other things, but the last thing on this slide is the wear pattern of our shoes. So if we are not getting kind of this proper foot strike where, maybe we're getting a little bit towards our heel, kind of a little bit to the outside of our foot, coming across the ball of our foot and then going into our big toe at the end. If that is different from side to side, it can be very, very telling. And again, that asymmetry can work its way up the chain and it can end up making our pelvic floor not work the way that we want it to. So yes, we're talking about pelvic floor, but we have to talk about pelvic floor literally from the ground up. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the cool thing recently, so you can see these two pictures here. The top one is a Topo shoe, the bottom one is a Nike shoe. If you look at the toe box, that Topo shoe is likely going to be way nicer for most people, pregnancy and postpartum. Yes, there might be like a rare few of us who our foot stays kind of narrow, but that Nike toe box is just going to squish everything in. And again, is that going to make our foot not work optimally? And that translates up the chain. I'm also a really big fan of like those yoga toe spacers. So if you have to wear a different type of shoe, say during your work day, if you get home at night and you throw on your cute little toe spacers, like, while you're watching TV, lovely. It can feel really weird the first couple times that you do it, but I feel like now my toes will tell me like, "Oh, I need my little toe spacers on." And I'll wear them for like 10, 20 minutes when I'm watching TV, and then I take them off, and man, like, my toes feel great afterwards. Um, the other things to think about are like, do you need a neutral shoe? Do you need a stability shoe? That can change over time, and that's okay. Sometimes really heavy kind of like stability style shoes, sometimes they actually, like, lock us into a position that doesn't really work for our system. So that is something that we can look at and see, okay, what is optimal for you and what is maybe not working as well as we want it to. Heel-toed heel-toe drop is another thing that I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, but is the distance from the heel of the shoe to the toe of the shoe and how much that changes. So like a high heel-toe drop might be 12, a medium one might be 8 millimeters, and then you have, low to none, which might be like a 0 to 4 millimeter drop. Again, this is going to be different for everybody, but it may change postpartum, and that is okay. One of the biggest things that I recommend is you actually get your feet remeasured. You do this in standing, so you're weight bearing. There's a device. I feel like I haven't seen one of these in a shoe store in a really long time, but I remember them from back in the day. But it is that like metal device that you can put your heel kind of jammed into, and there's these cute little movie things, and it can give you a really, really accurate measurement of your foot. It's called a Brannick device. Um, but you want to measure your foot on that in weight bearing, and you typically would go to your big toe. But some of us, like me, I have one foot that has a long second toe. So I would need to measure that long second toe versus just the big toe on that foot. Um, we also want to think about like because your foot goes through so many changes during pregnancy and postpartum, you need to be doing some foot, some ankle exercises, some calf exercises. We actually want to have some appropriate stretches for our calves. So we're not just kind of going into our typical runner stance where our, one foot is back and straight, and you're just letting that heel drop towards the ground to stretch your calf. For that, you actually want to turn your back foot slightly in and you actually want to rotate your pelvis slightly out. And that can actually get you a much more effective calf stretch. I love to do a variety of heel raises, and this depends on what you're presenting with. Some people need specific sorts of heel raises. So you can't just be doing that willy-nilly because it depends on what that heel bone is doing. But heel raises can be very, very important. The other thing is backward walking. It is kind of amazing how many people can't walk backwards without it being, like, really doofy feeling. So I recommend, like, try to just see, like, what does a backward walk feel like? And then what does a backward walk feel like if you try to almost stay like heel toe, like you're, walking on a tightrope? What does it feel like if you try to walk backwards on a tightrope? And if that is really funky, you can work on that, and that can give you some more foot and ankle control. Because like I said, this foot and ankle control, if it's wonky, it travels up the chain, and it's gonna make your pelvic floor or something else, misbehave. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so that's done with the feet, at least for now, I think. We're going to talk about abdominal wall. So, a lot of you may have heard about this. There's something called diastasis rectus abdominis, or DRA. So, it is 1,000,000% normal during pregnancy. The majority of people during pregnancy will have a diastasis, and that is fine. Your baby is growing, your abdominal wall needs to make room for baby. So basically, what is happening, you should see on that picture, there's like kind of the midline of like the six pack abs. And you can see in that first picture, that six pack ab is, very, very narrow at midline. And the following pictures are different degrees of diastasis and different types, basically. So you can have a diastasis where it's kind of right around the belly button. That's the second picture. You can see the third picture where it's lower, like it's around the belly button, but then a little bit lower down. That fourth picture, it's above the belly button. And then that fifth picture is kind of some differences all along that linea alba. So your linea alba is basically the connective tissue in between your six pack abs. Okay. It is not a hernia. Okay. That linea alba basically just stretches out a bit. So the connective tissue gets a little bit gets a little bit thinner and then it can stretch. Okay. So you can also have a hernia, but a diastasis is not a hernia. Those are two totally different things. Postpartum, one of the things that we have to look at is how your abdominal wall is functioning. Do we have a diastasis? And if so, how functional is it? And can we reduce some of this diastasis? Can we make sure that our abdominal wall is functioning the way that we want it to, so that we try to reduce the likelihood that we'll have a pelvic floor issue? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here is a picture of what you can see if we're like actually testing for a diastasis. So this is, you can see like the legs kind of in the top of the picture, sports bra in the bottom of the picture. So this is a person doing a little bit of like a mini crunch up, and you can see the line where it says bulging. That is basically the entire six-pack abdominal wall is kind of lifting up a little bit, and then that smaller, you know, upside down arc is basically like the coning that can happen. And that coning is happening right at the linea alba, where it's kind of squishing up a little bit. So we can have different things happen in our abdominal wall. Okay, so next slide. So if you wanted to check for this, what you can actually do is lay on your back with your knees bent. You're gonna check 3 areas. I usually start right at the belly button. So you basically just take your fingers and you squish down into your belly button. We're also gonna check about 2 inches above your belly button and about 2 inches below your belly button. So if you start at belly button, you're laying on your back, your knees are bent, stick your fingers into your belly button as much as you feel comfortable with, and you are going to do a tiny crunch. So lifting just your neck and like the top of your shoulder blades up off the floor. And you're gonna feel what happens at your belly button. You're gonna come back down. You can walk your fingers about 2 inches up, do that same little mini crunch, see what happens. You can walk your fingers about 2 inches below your belly button, mini crunch, and see what happens. So you're looking to see, does it feel like your fingers get pushed up out of the way? Does it feel like, oh, I can kind of sink in and I can almost like feel the edges of, my six pack abs? Does it feel like the entire six pack abs kind of lift up and almost want to kick your fingers out of the way? Um, that is one of the ways to just do a quick screen of, hey, what is my abdominal wall doing? If something happened there, then you can reach out to me. You can be like, ooh, I don't know what this is, but I felt something interesting. And that can indicate that maybe our abdominal wall isn't functioning the way that we want it to. And again, that can have some impact on our pelvic floor. Okay, next slide. So the cool thing about diastasis is that even if you had a baby 10, 20 years ago and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I just did this little test and I'm feeling something funky going on," it can be improved even years and years and years later. Basically, we have to just coordinate your core a bit more. We might have to look at your rib cage. We may have to modify some exercises that you were doing. So some people will I'd be like, I'm doing like the hardest variation of a plank ever, but they're kind of like blowing out their core the whole time. So maybe they're doing that big kind of doming thing that's happening. And we just may have to offer a couple modifications to get that core kicking in the way that we want it to, so that we're not kind of blowing out and preventing that diastasis from, improving basically. And you can see in this picture here, how this goes hand in hand with pelvic floor health. So at the top of this picture in the left hand one, that's when we inhale. So you can see our diaphragm is at the top. Our diaphragm actually drops down when we inhale, and our pelvic floor drops down when we inhale. Okay. When we exhale, our diaphragm actually lifts up and our pelvic floor lifts up as well. Okay. So when we're doing some of our core exercises, those areas are working in coordination with our abdominal wall. An inhale is a relaxation of our abdominal wall, and an exhale is a contraction of our abdominal wall. And if there are times that maybe we're breath holding during an abdominal exercise, that can put more pressure down on our pelvis, and that can also potentially worsen the diastasis that could be happening. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is a non-exhaustive list of things to consider postpartum. So one of the things that we always have to think about is like, hey, like what kind of delivery was it? Was it vaginal? Was it a cesarean? Was it an emergency cesarean? Was it a planned cesarean? How long was our labor and delivery? How long was our pushing stage? Um, there is so much around this, and if we went in with the idea of, like, "I'm going to have this amazing vaginal delivery, and this is what was in my birth plan, and I planned for this for months and months, and I'm so psyched about it," and then we end up with an emergency C-section, that can be really hard, and that can be a struggle to wrap our brain around, and it can be very traumatizing too. I see this not a lot, but I see it a good amount where because we had this emergency C-section, our connection with our body is different, and we have to kind of unravel that quite a bit so that we can start to make those connections again and feel okay with things, you know? The other thing to think about is, did we have any tearing or did we have an episiotomy? So we can have different grades of tearing from a grade 1 to a grade 4. Um, and a grade 4 can involve deeper layers of the pelvic floor, and that is going to be more risky from like an incontinence standpoint. Did we have complications? Like, did we end up having some hemorrhaging? Did we end up having to go back into the hospital? Was our blood pressure not under control? We also think about our breastfeeding status. So, are we breastfeeding? Did we try to breastfeed and it wasn't working? Those things will impact not just our physical health, but also our mental health. And here is a long list of symptoms that indicate that your pelvic floor could potentially need some help postpartum. We've talked about a lot of these, the leakage, the pressure, but even just things like abdominal, low back, or pelvic pain, some sciatic pain that maybe came on during pregnancy and then didn't clear up. Are you having some issues with scar healing, either perineal scarring or cesarean scarring? Is there issues with healing, issues with sensitivity? Um, Another big thing is pain with returning to sex. I see this unfortunately a lot, and it is something that we can help with significantly. Another thing is urine or bowel frequency or urgency, constipation, pain with bowel movements. I mean, this is, like I said, a non exhaustive list. But these indicate that something in our system is not working well and we need a little bit of help. Next slide, please. Okay. These are things too that we could not get into today, but very, very important factors that need to just be mentioned. So postpartum counseling. One of the questions was, and we'll talk about this a little bit at the end, but basically feeling like I want to get back into running in a body that's not my own. So there could be a lot of different complex feelings around postpartum. Was there trauma during labor and delivery? Are we dealing with some postpartum depression, anxiety? Do we need referrals for postpartum counseling? This is also a big part of what I do in making sure that all of my clients are feeling heard and seen and get the help that they need. Nutrition and hydration, I know we all know this as runners, but postpartum, we can also be experiencing relative energy deficiency with return to our sport. So we need to make sure that our nutrition and our hydration needs are being met. This will also help us avoid bone stress injuries as we're returning to running. Stress levels, mental health. I mean, what more do I have to say about that? Like, your life is going to be different postpartum, and we need to make sure that these things are being managed the best we can, and we get whatever help that we need. If we are breastfeeding, I highly recommend doing consultations with a lactation consultant to make sure that you're optimizing this for you and for baby. Um, we're looking at a significant amount of water loss around that 8-week postpartum, about 700 mils a day. And we're also looking at about 500 calorie per day increase, what we need while we're breastfeeding. Your fatigue levels might be off the charts. You need to make sure that you have like the best sports bra ever if you are breastfeeding. And even if you're not breastfeeding, like your breasts may have changed significantly and you need great sports bras. Um, are you running with a stroller? And typically, we're not going to be running with a stroller until our child has some great head control. But are your mechanics changing when you're running with a stroller? There's also these really cool things called pessaries, which are basically an insertable device that is typically made of medical grade silicone, kind of like a tampon, but they come in different shapes and sizes. And pessaries can be really, really helpful if you're dealing with any symptoms of prolapse. Um, that is something that is typically fit by your OBGYN. There are pelvic floor physical therapists who fit pessaries. I don't have that training just yet, but I am looking into that. And then, of course, like a gradual return to running is something to consider versus that typical, you're clear at 6 weeks, go have all the sex, do all the exercise. Um, that's probably not realistic from a sex or exercise standpoint. So we typically like to recommend a return to running that's pretty gradual, and maybe we don't even really start this until about 3 months postpartum. Next slide, please. So here is basically we're at the end of our like running through all the things, pelvic floor, postpartum, but what does pelvic floor look like that is, a high quality of care? We are not just doing Kegels postpartum. I am getting you off the table. I am looking at how your system is moving as a entire body, not just as a pelvic floor. We are doing an external evaluation, including all the orthopedic things, looking at your feet, looking at your hips, your spine, your abs. We're doing an internal evaluation of what's going on with your pelvic floor function. Are you strong? Are you weak? Are you not coordinated? Is everything in there painful? Like, what's going on? And we also have to look into function. So, what is happening once we are actually getting you up, getting you moving, and looking at like the demands and the functional loading of your actual sport? That is going to play a huge role in getting you back to doing what you need to do. Next slide, please. So, how to work with me. I'm in my nice office space. I literally just moved here about a month ago. This is in Randolph. I do telehealth in New Jersey. I also offer virtual consultations out of state. You can follow me on Instagram at Dr. Drahos PT. And if you want to be a part of an awesome running community, you can check out the New Jersey chapter of Women in Ultra Running. That is just getting off the ground, and we are looking on building that as much as we can, and we welcome you. Next slide, please. You can also, of course, come see me at a Sasquatch event, and you can see here that I provide all of the menstrual products for Sasquatch. Next slide. So thank you so much to Kim. Thank you so much, Stat Squad. I super look forward to chatting with any of you. Feel free to, shoot me an email, follow me on Instagram. You can DM me there, and you can check out this QR code that will link to my website.
Colleen, that was awesome. I learned a lot. There was a lot I did not know, especially about the feet. I did not realize all that was happening with feet.
Yes, it is all connected. And as runners, our feet are pretty darn important. So we have to look at that and how it translates kind of into the rest of our body, including our pelvic floor.
Everything's connected.
Sure is.
All right, we are going to transition to we're going to work through the questions that were pre-submitted by people who registered for the webinar. So in no particular order, it's, I guess, the order that it came in on registration. So first question up, which I feel like you get this question every time you do a webinar with us. And I know what your answer is going to be, but here's the question. What are the best pelvic floor exercises?
And I have a terrible, obnoxious answer for this, and it depends. I don't know. Nobody knows until they assess you and they figure out what the heck your pelvic floor actually needs. Some people are going to need some strengthening. Some people are going to actually need some relaxation of their pelvic floor. Some people just need some kind of like coordination and timing training. Some people just need to work on their feet, and then their pelvic floor figures it out. It 1,000,000% depends on what you're presenting with, what your symptoms are. And honestly, too, I could have two people come in with the same exact symptoms, and their pelvic floor treatment and exercise plan is completely different because the pelvic floor might just be the thing that's kind of yelling the loudest, but other stuff is making it do that. So you have to figure out what the other stuff is. And it is completely like a whole body approach. People always ask about Kegels too. And Also, it depends. Honestly, in my practice, Kegels are definitely not like super high on my priority list for most people. There are some situations that it is kind of more called for. But again, like you need an assessment to determine should you actually be doing these Kegels? Are they actually going to be helpful? Or do we need to just get the rest of your system kind of on board so your pelvic floor can be like, oh, I don't have to work that hard, or oh, now I actually know how to work hard enough. And then it functions in the way that we want it to, so we don't have leakage, we don't have pain, all that kind of stuff. So the overall in conclusion answer is it depends, and nobody likes that answer. But you need to go get an event to figure out what the best pelvic floor exercise is for you.
Totally. And I think this comes up in each of the webinars that I do with various professionals. Is the answer is usually it depends, which is totally valid. So,
yeah.
All right, next question we got. Why, after regaining strength, am I still running 4 minutes per mile slower than my previous average? So this is somebody who's postpartum.
Yes. So this is a great question, and I would have like 5 million follow-up questions about like, well, what else is going on with your system? Because there are probably a lot of factors that are contributing to you still running slower than your previous average. Again, do we go back to like, what the heck are your feet doing? Are you actually getting like good propulsion from like the ground up? Do we have weakness somewhere else in the chain that just kind of hasn't figured itself out postpartum? My other question would be, how far postpartum are you? Are we talking we are 6 weeks postpartum and we're like, hey, I want to get back to it, and I'm like, ooh, that's a fast timeline. Or are we 5 years postpartum and we just started getting back to running again over the last month, and like, yeah, we might be a little bit slower. What I would assume from this is maybe we're a little bit further postpartum and we have taken that time to get stronger, but maybe we haven't been strengthening some of the specific areas that we need, or maybe our coordination is still a little bit off, so our body is almost like expending too much energy, and that's what'll come out in like, I'm running slower than what I used to. So yeah, I would wonder what's going on lower down in the system, and then like we talked about in the webinar, what's even going on with our core. Is there something that is kind of an energy leak there too, or is our abdominal wall functioning the way that we want it to? And then like, I mean, oh gosh, there's a lot of factors. Are we even doing like appropriate training to try to get faster at running? Or are we just like, oh cool, I'm doing like some squats and some deadlifts and I expect that to reflect in my speed? So many factors, hormonal factors too. If we are closer postpartum, are we still breastfeeding? What is going on with that situation? Because that's going to impact, what our musculoskeletal system is doing as well. What else could there be? I mean, that's a lot. But yeah, like, are you doing plyometrics? Like, are we doing single leg loading? What else is going on with our very, very specific training that like, ooh, can we perfect this a little bit more? Or are we just missing like a muscle group, and oh man, like our pelvic floor actually needs to be a little bit stronger, and how do we get that to turn on better? But I would have a million thousand questions for you to figure out like why, because just from that question, I don't know. There's a million options. So it's another bad answer. Sorry.
It depends. It depends. All right. Next question we got is, do you do live in-person events? I am a nurse and lactation consultant and would love to connect.
This is great, and I did do a nice little shout out to a lactation consultant, so I appreciate your inquiry here. Yes, I do live in-person events. I do workshops at like local gyms. I have a little bit of space in my current office where I'd be able to also hold some workshops just on like a smaller scale. We can definitely connect. I think I have your email, so I will send you an email. So look out for that from cdrahos@drahospt.com.
Yay connections. I love it. That's good. All right. Next one. How to manage urinary incontinence on faster runs.
Yeah. These are so many like I don't know, and it depends question.
That's fair. It's totally fair.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors. I would have a lot more questions to be like, all right, when is this happening on those faster runs? Is there a fatigue factor? So do we just have to work up your endurance for those faster runs? Is there something going on with your feet that your feet aren't doing something right, and then it is making your pelvic floor start to lose control at some point, depending on what our pace is. What is going on, even from just like a running technique standpoint? Has our cadence changed postpartum? Do we actually have to look a little bit more specifically, like, has our running gait changed quite a bit? And a lot of you might already know this, but as far as cadence goes, so that's like how many steps that you take per minute. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Our magic number that we usually look for is at least 180 footfalls per minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 180. If we are significantly less than that, something else is gonna, for lack of a better term, kind of like fall apart, and that could be your pelvic floor. Are we overstriding when we're trying to hit like this certain pace? Again, a lot of questions that I would have as a follow-up, because I always tell my clients, I'm like, I'm a detective for you. I throw on my detective hat. I ask you a bajillion questions because we have to try to hone in on why this is actually happening. So yes, we would have to figure out quite a bit of what is going on from a pelvic floor function standpoint, because there's something happening in the system that is making that pelvic floor fail when you are going into faster speeds. Hopefully that makes sense. And it could be even like hip strength. It could be abdominal wall strength. A lot of different factors, again, that we would have to investigate.
Cool. All right. That's a nice segue into this question. How to efficiently and effectively strength train? Kind of a broad question, but I'm sure you've got some talking points on this one.
Yes, definitely broad. And again, it would be like, well, it kind of depends, but we can like fine tune this a little bit more. So when it comes to especially, strength training for runners, like I said, you want to be doing some things focusing on your feet. You want to be doing some things focusing on your calves, your ankles. We're looking at like, oh, in a perfect world, like 3 days a week of strength training. If you can only do 2, it's better than 1, but there's actually a pretty big jump from 2 to 3 days of strength training. You do not have to do 5 hours, of strength training in the gym either. You can be like, I'm going to be as efficient as I can with hitting as many body parts in one movement. And you bust out a great strength routine in 20, maybe 30 minutes. There's also this thought process of working up to lifting heavy and having that be your way to be like super efficient and super effective. The one thing with that is sometimes because we're lifting super heavy, we aren't doing some specific movements that could be great specifically for running. So we might be doing things that are more like some squats or some deadlifts. And I love to see things where we're more in like a split stance. So variety of lunges, variety of plyometrics when we're in like a lunge variation. And I love to also incorporate some core and like rib cage activities when we are doing that, so that we are loading the entire chain. I do some just weird moves with a lot of my clients. They might not be particularly like, oh, that's something that I've seen before, but we'll have you do different things with some bands, different foot positions, because I'm also kind of trying to find some weakness in your system, and then we challenge where you're actually having that weakness. So in conclusion, kind of like, you want total body, you want running specific, you do want to be able to lift a little bit heavy, but not at the expense of running like specific type movements. And then of course, on the it depends side, it's going to be very specific to what your, for lack of a better term, deficiencies are. So where are you having difficulty, and we have to really kind of attack that and get that functioning better. So strength training looks different for all my runners based on what their issues are. But hopefully that gives a little bit of
Yeah, yeah,
an idea of what I kind of look for and what I promote.
totally. Awesome. All right. We are on the last question, and it's a great, great question. It is. How to adapt to a body that doesn't feel like the one I'm used to.
Yeah. And this is like a loaded question, right? Um, there is not a simple answer for this one either. And some of this could be like, okay, like what do we even have to look back on how is our brain and our nervous system kind of processing how everything went through pregnancy wise, how we're feeling about our labor and delivery, how we're feeling just in general about what our body is behaving like and what our body is looking like postpartum. There's so much wrapped up. That it's uncovering all of those layers too, because my guess is that doing some good looking inward and some good kind of like brain work and building some confidence back in your body would be key for that, because it sounds like kind of this trying to adapt to this body that just really doesn't feel like what I'm used to. It's like, it sounds like we're not confident in what's going on with our system, whether that's from a strength standpoint, a coordination standpoint, and even for some of my clients, like from just like a purely aesthetic standpoint, they're like, my body has changed and it looks differently, and I have to figure out how I feel about this or what I can do to change it. There's no right or wrong answer on, you know, what your reason is for your body feeling like it's not feeling how it used to. But that would take, again, like a lot of questioning, a lot of like detective work on figuring out like, hey, like what's going on here? And how do we start to incorporate some movements in a really safe and like comfortable fashion? Because I bet it's like building some confidence in this system, and getting you back to understanding that like, yeah, your body is totally different now. Even how you think about things might be totally different now, but like we can still end up being really comfortable and really confident in our system. It just can take some building that back up.
Totally. Awesome. Well, those are all the questions that came in, Colleen. So I think we will wrap it up here. Any parting words? Well, actually, how about you tell folks how they can find you?
Sure.
You know, website, socials, all that. I know you talked about your office before, but feel free to repeat that info.
Okay, so here we go. Um, so basically, I have my office in Randolph in Morris County. You can find my website at www.drahospt.com. So DRAHOSPT.com. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Drahos PT. I've been trying to post more on Instagram. I'm not so great at it. I've been posting some more running content though. Been trying. It's
Totally.
not my favorite interaction, but I've been attempting a little bit more. Um, but yeah, like feel free, check out my website. There's a contact form on there too that you can submit if you have questions. If you want to just ask me something else, you can also shoot me an email at cdrahos@drahospt.com. And I'm going to be at the Squatchy Surprise
Yep.
in August?
July. End of
July.
July. Last weekend of
Okay.
July. Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah.
At the end of July, and then I will be at Wild Goose as well with my Chafin station. So feel free to stop by. I'll have all my gear on. You won't be able to miss the Drahos PT gear.
Yes. So good. I'm excited for this year. I'm really glad we stuck with the partnership, and just so appreciative of all the info and that you've provided to the community, and especially all the menstrual products at our races. It's just really amazing. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me or have sent emails of like, this is so amazing that the products are right next to the toilets and I don't have to go and ask. Like, it's there, and there's a huge variety to choose from.
Yes, a very big variety. And we like legit sent out a Google form to ask people like,
Yes.
what do you like?
Yes.
Because not everybody, and this would be my biggest pet peeve, is if the only option at an aid station was like an OB tampon. Like,
Oh,
I'm not doing it. I'm just gonna be, free bleeding everywhere. I don't even know how to use one of those. No
you and
way.
I have talked about OB tampons before.
Nope.
We
But
both feel
people
the same
did want
way.
them, so they are
Yeah.
in the menstrual, the plethora of menstrual products that we have. There are some OB tampons. I just
Yeah.
will not be using them.
Same. We're on the same page.
Oh,
Uh,
no, this is great. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. And just trying to get the word out about, that pelvic floor PT is an option. And obviously, if you're not local to where I am, like, go get yourself some pelvic floor PT where you are. Like, you deserve it. You need some help. Do it.
totally. Awesome. Thank you, Colleen. This was fantastic. It was squatch-tastic.
Yes, it certainly was. Thank you very much.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to our webinar this evening. Appreciate you guys joining us tonight, or if you're listening to the replay on the podcast or watching the replay on YouTube, we appreciate you. And we will be back here for the next one. I think it's in a couple of weeks. We're back with Sarah Strong, the trail therapist, getting back on the mental side of running, which there's crossover with all these webinars, which is fantastic. So until we see you again, keep it squatchy.